Hello and welcome to the Cyber Hero Adventures Defenders of the Digital Universe show. Today's show focuses on answering the question, what are the strengths and limitations of the Mitre Att&ck matrix? You'll learn about Mitre Att&ck, a globally accessible knowledge base of adversary tactics and techniques based on real-world observations. The attack knowledge base is used as a foundation for the development of specific threat models and methodologies in the private sector, in government, and in the cybersecurity product and service community. With the creation of Att&ck, Mitre is fulfilling its mission to solve problems for a safer world by bringing communities together to develop more effective cybersecurity. Att&ck is open and available to any person or organization for use at no charge. Stay tuned to find out more. I'm your host, Gary Berman. Our mission is to shine the light on the people and organizations who keep us safe online while at work, home, and school, and to serve as a business-to-business networking platform for the cybersecurity and IT communities. We've learned that 55% of human communications is nonverbal. That's why we include a video feed, so that you have the option of seeing our guests or simply to just listen. You never know who you're going to connect with and how you'll be able to maximize opportunities resulting from hearing from our guests. As the victim of a series of cyber attacks, I've learned that the only time that you hear about hacking or cybersecurity is when the criminals win. Well, not anymore. Let's begin by saying thank you to today's panel of unsung cyber heroes who represent the countless people who toil in anonymity to keep us safe at home, work, and school. Adam Pennington is the principal cybersecurity engineer of Mitre. His focus is on operations, cyber threat intelligence, and deception, and he leads the team behind Mitre Att&ck. Adam's specialties include deception, cyber threat, intelligence, intrusion detection, storage security, security architecture, attacker observation, and analysis. Hey Adam, welcome to the show.
Hey Gary, thank you for having me here today. I really appreciate the opportunity and looking forward to chatting a bit about Att&ck.
Me too. Our next guest is Chris Kennedy, the CISO and VP of Customer Success at Att&ck. Att&ck is a leader in the emerging market of continuous security validation. Chris and his team built the industry's first platform that enables red and blue teams to test the effectiveness of their security controls and staff. Their platform supports the Mitre Att&ck matrix. Chris, we're going to learn a lot about what you do today on today's show, but I'd like to ask you and begin by asking you, why do you do it? What is your mission? Tell us your origin story, if you don't mind.
Gary, listen, appreciate a little runway on this. I've had an exceptionally harrowing career. First, thanks for having me on the show. I really look forward to it. And thanks for the good chat, Adam, today. First and foremost, I was born into this industry unintentionally. I was one of the Marine Corps' first information system security officers in the late 90s, responsible for securing the largest post in the Marine Corps, largest base in the Marine Corps, Camp Lejeune. And from that, lived through kind of the birth of the industry and witnessed the Marine Corps rolling out its enterprise infrastructure as a concept. Lived through the then malicious worms of the day that made cybersecurity a real industry because of the enterprise effects that they could have. Did a good job down there, focusing on the basics, password changes, antivirus controls, policies and training, and got pulled up to build the Marine Corps Security Operations Center when that was kind of a new venture and less commoditized. Concepts of SIM hadn't been born yet. And from that, lived through real state-sponsored attacks. If you can read about them, now historically in the Byzantine series, the Moonlight Mazes, and things like that. When the U.S. government realized, holy cow, state-sponsored attacks are real and can have an impact to U.S. government and military operations. And so that was hair-raising for me in terms of to be on the pointy tip of the spear for cyber defense for the Marine Corps as a young lieutenant, then captain. Transitioned out after 7 years of that and went to defense contracting and had the opportunity to build the U.S. Department of Treasury's cyber ops program and evolve that into one of the most revered programs in the U.S. government. And we did it in a very effective shoestring budgety way, doing SecDevOps concepts before it was a cool thing to talk about, with an integrated team of threat intelligence analysts, developers and infrastructure operators all cohesively trying to solve the problem together. And it worked really well. I'm really proud of the team that was there that did that. And then lastly, I transitioned from that after almost a decade to build technology risk management for the largest hedge fund in the world before I got to Att&ck. And there's anything that I've learned in what you introed, Gary, is that I too have suffered through tons of security incidents. And the one underpinning thing that always struck me was that I am making an exceptionally broad assumption that the technology stack, process, and people under me that run the security paradigm, that run the operations play every day, it's going to work all the time. And it doesn't. And almost every time that I was in one of those incidents, all of that technology stack, all of those people, something broke. And it's confirmed in the Verizon data breach incident response report over the last 3 years. They said every incident they've analyzed says that 82% of the incidents they investigated, all the technology was there, all the people were there, all the process was there, something broke. And so what the realization for me is that I came to Att&ck under the auspice that there's a good reason for validation. The ecosystems that we work in today and the volatility of them are so complex, you cannot make that assumption. And because of that, validation is now an integral part of the systems engineering lifecycle that is the technology we live in today. And Mitre Att&ck, being kind of the backbone of Att&ck, is an excellent body of knowledge that allows you to then illustrate what are the specific threat behaviors that you make these security investments for. And then automation platforms, because of that body of knowledge, enable you to continuously test. And that's a missing part of the equation for my entire career that now exists. And so my mission, my go-to, why I'm at Att&ck is I think this is a meaningful set of technology that needs to be invested in across every organization, is how they instrument their environments, as well as a paradigm shift in how risk management operations and other tertiary security functions operate, because attack can apply in so many different ways that I think we'll talk about today.
I mean, that is just an amazing origin story and background. And so just a little bit more on a human level, why did you get into this in the first place? Thank you for your service in the Marines. Why did you do it? Why did you first enroll in the Marines?
Oh, well, I mean, I was drawn to the service aspects of that. I thought the Marines had a very cool mission. DNA wise, I've always found myself drawn to, those kinds of roles that really stress your intellectual and physical being. And so that's why I've ended up in the crazy places that I've ended up. And so it's terrifically exciting to be at Att&ck. This is my first startup. This is my first time fundamentally on the sales side. I've always been on the operations or buy side of the house. But it's something I've never done before. And I think it's perfectly primed for me in terms of what I'm like, and to get in there and mix it up and elbow and fist fight this concept into an organization. My role today at Att&ck is VP of Customer Success and CISO of the company. CISO is focused on corporate security and making sure our product is safe, but the customer success element is awesome. I get to bring those 24 years of experience, wisdom, and skepticism about how your program should work with this attack concept and this great operating platform that allows you to test it continuously and help influence and shape those other CISOs and those other security threat intelligence analysts and operators on how they can take advantage of this to improve their remits as well. And I think that's just awesome that I get to take all of that and then up level everyone else through my experiences.
Well, with that great background, Adam, please share your origin story with our audience.
So I definitely have some very, very different origins, but I've also been in some similar places. I went to school for computer science at Carnegie Mellon University and focused there on computer systems. So, when I graduated looking to stay in the computer system space, I was really into operating systems. I got a job as a operating system kernel developer. So, very, very much not in the security space, very, very much in the weeds of the internals. That was short-lived. Thanks to the dot-com crash in 9/11, I was laid off, and job market was not terrific at that point in time. And so I returned to Carnegie Mellon as a PhD student, because obvious alternative to being in the real world. And I was focused on researching ways to add security monitoring to computer peripherals. So my PhD dissertation work was around storage-based intrusion detection, doing something tripwire-like inside a hard drive where you're watching block transactions in real time and understanding what adversaries are doing from there. I also did some of my first honeypotting during that time period. I also worked during that time period as a professional sound engineer on the side for money, because being a PhD student doesn't pay that well, which might explain my home setup a little bit.
By the way, it's a great home setup.
Thank you. Microphone I'd wanted for a while and just finally did it.
Right.
So when I was close to doing my dissertation, I was interested in getting out of academia, wanted to continue doing research though in sort of the corporate space. And that's how I ended up at Mitre. I was hired really to be a researcher originally. So I started off as a researcher. We have a very large internal research and development program, as well as quite a bit of research we do directly for the government. But I fairly quickly, within a couple of months, got pulled into operations as well, working with Mitre's internal security team. So, similar to what Chris was talking about, we were doing SecDevOps before we had a good word for it. We were dealing with some very real activity that we got to deal with face to face, and built up a internal security practice very much focused around threat behaviors. And it's the first space where I really got into the cyber threat intelligence space and working with groups, working with adversaries, understanding their behaviors and finding opportunities to watch them. And so most of my 12 years at Mitre has been that kind of a mix, leading research while also keeping my hands dirty in operations, both with Mitre internal teams as well as with Mitre government sponsors. As far as my journey with Att&ck, I helped collect the intelligence that was used to create Att&ck.
Wow.
in the first place. Worked with the team as they were creating it, and then verified that as we were putting that first version out, that it was all techniques that we'd seen in the wild, that it was all actually threat intelligence driven.
Well, just on that point, where did you start? I mean, how do you try to get your arms around and create a matrix of these ones and zeros?
And really, it was some good intelligence analysts picking apart the data, starting to look at the individual adversary behaviors we'd seen. It also started small. The flag that's over my shoulder that's got 266 techniques in that version. The first version of Att&ck didn't look like that. It had 40-something techniques. Mm-hmm. It was an Excel spreadsheet. It was small, and so we started small. We started with quite a few less tactics. I think we started with 6 tactics, and so everything has just grown as we've seen more behavior, and worked with the community over time.
Yeah, interesting point on that, Gary, is that if you think about the evolution of threat intelligence as a whole, the commodity of the time a decade ago was indicators of compromise. Like when I was at the Department of Treasury, there was kind of a network of operators within the other federal agencies and some .mil domains that would share with you, and whoever could get out the freshest IOC to the next organization, they would then use those and put it into their detection criteria. And holy crap, I've got this same actor in my environment as well. And so it was all very temporal. It was very difficult to manage through time because those IOCs stack up in your detection functions and whatnot. And so the pivot to TTPs was an exceptionally powerful thing, but you didn't see that happen in a unified way. Everyone was, that had someone like Adam on their staff and could afford to have someone like Adam on their staff was responsible for providing that up-level concept. And it took, from my perspective, it took Mitre codifying that as a central focal point organization. And then they used their social networks, much like the social networks already existed for exchanging IOCs, to start doing that.
Well, one of the interesting things about that I've learned in my journey through cybersecurity is that the criminals, black hats, if you will, really freely share information. And they seem to me very horizontally, organized and oriented, where the defenders are, for reasons I'd like to ask you about, is this true, are much more vertically, oriented. And is that a valid, statement?
I think so, absolutely, for two reasons. One, both sides of the house monetize it, right? Like if I've got some fresh attacker intel, that can be monetized on the dark web, in terms of exploit techniques and things like that, 0 days, whatnot. But then also, there's threat intelligence companies that, collecting that information takes work and they want to sell it. So it's not incentive to share it equally. Second, if you're an organization, what's your incentive to share? If there's not reciprocity in sharing, like all you're doing is giving, potentially you're exposing yourself to legal risk in terms of you knew something you didn't, or you had an incident and you shared that information, that's an indicator you had one. And so there's generally been, decades of serious legal concern in how this works, which is why I think Att&ck standing up for the public good of being the focal point collector of this information and sharing it in an open, shareable way, disambiguates that, takes the risk out of that sharing out of it. And then, of course, there's obviously legal arrangements you can make for those that are more proactive about sharing with someone like Mitre, so they can create the sightings ecosystem of who and where has seen this and things like that. And that's a wonderfully powerful way to operate because, again, it was all back office operators 10, 15 years ago.
Well, so to that end, Adam, because it's open source and freely available, what's to keep the criminals from learning from it and trying to stay a step ahead?
So that was actually a question we had when we first put it out. It was, something that we went through as a consideration before putting this out to the public. And are we teaching adversaries new things and finally describing this area? And I come from a threat sharing space where I'm very familiar with concerns around sharing, equities, trying to decide, are we making things better or worse? One of the things with Att&ck that we've set down from the beginning is that any technique we add to Att&ck has to have been described publicly somewhere before we add it. Now, that description could be a tweet, it could be a black hat presentation where somebody said this was a good idea, it could be a red team tool where it's been implemented out in the public. We may take proof that it's being used by real adversaries in the wild from private sources. But any particular behavior that we're adding to the attack matrix has already been published by someone somewhere so that we can cite back to it and say they could have found it. We may be pulling things together in a way that may make it easier for people, but it is information they did have access to in the first place. And we also think that the advantage that it gives to defenders in being able to understand these activities, for red teams to be able to pick them up and test with them, and for the cyber threat intelligence folks to be able to talk about them, outweighs any disadvantages that might come from showing it to the adversaries.
Yeah, it makes sense. And so you mentioned earlier, Adam, about the number of verticals or attack vectors, 200 and some odd. Can you just provide an overview of the attack matrix for our audience members who may not be as familiar with it?
Sure. So Att&ck's a knowledge base of adversary behaviors. It's like an encyclopedia of things that real-world adversaries have done in the wild. It's broken up into a couple categories. So across the top of what we call the matrix, which is the form that a lot of people are used to seeing, we have these 12 what we call tactics. And these are high-level adversary goals, things like initial access, privilege escalation, exfiltration, or impact. And so those are describing high-level things that the adversary is trying to accomplish. Underneath each of those, we have this more specific behaviors or techniques. So under initial access, an adversary trying to get into your environment, we might have something like phishing. And so the adversary is sending a malicious email. We fairly recently did a large reorganization of the attack matrix. in order to try to even out the level of the different techniques, make them more co-equal in how much scope of adversary behavior they covered, and added a new structure that we call sub-techniques. So it used to be that phishing was the only level of techniques, or used to be a different technique name. But so now under phishing, we have spear phishing attachment, spear phishing link, and spear phishing via service. And so these are still techniques, but they're even more specific ways that an adversary can do it. Drilling down one level farther, we also keep track of the very specific ways that specific adversaries have done a technique. So if you're familiar with tactics, techniques, and procedures, it's probably not a surprise that we've got tactics, we've got techniques, and inside techniques and sub-techniques, we have procedures. And these are the specific ways that real adversaries have done it. So instead of spear phishing attachment, we might have that APT28 sent spear phishing emails containing Microsoft Office attachments. And all of that is linked back to the original open source, publicly available threat intelligence so that people can check our work and see if they agree with our assessment of it. And again, we're not publishing private intelligence in attack. We're referencing back and collecting things that are out there in the wild.
Well, it's really interesting you use the word phishing, and I'll come to you in just a moment, Chris, is in our cartoons, in the Cyber Hero Adventures, Defenders of the Digital Universe that we created, we wrestled with the idea, how do you anthropomorphize hacks? How do you make, ones and zeros in these behaviors, approachable to people who are not, steeped into cybersecurity or technology? So, for example, our character is called Phoebe the Fisher, and it's a very subtle way we characterize kind of half fish, half human character, where she has a harpoon, which of course is for whale fishing, big targets. She has a spear, which is, as you described, for targeted spear fishing attack, and we have a regular fishing rod for, widespread fishing. It was a very interesting creative and communications challenge to take the complexity of what you and all the great folks at Mitre have done, and to distill it into something that people can get their heads around. Chris, go ahead, you wanted to add?
Yeah, I wanted to come up a level on your question because it's the heart of the philosophy of the mission that Att&ck is and I am into. I think it's crazy when I get that question because I think the industry has rotated on fear, uncertainty, and doubt since its inception. Security is a hard thing to sell. You have to sell through fear, and I think that's bad. I think that you focus on what you know and what you can what you can actually defend against. And when you're confident that you have that nailed, then you can start talking about unknown unknowns. And so philosophically, the reason for that is quite simply, security is all about making things hard enough that they move on to the next target. The reason why actors today have been successful, even with using legacy techniques and legacy TTPs, is because they have enormous automation behind how they're attacking. And so when you introduce a change with a new TTP and they haven't had automated, that creates development work for them. If you can adequately defend against a known automated attack mechanism, then they have to introduce work into their life cycle, their workflow. And so every incident I've ever been involved in, it's the dumb stuff, and it's it's not the 0 day, it's the 4-year-old patch that on the legacy system that was there, and then the lateral movement was that the controls were broken and we didn't actually have the visibility that we thought we did, or the operator didn't see the thing in the chaff because he wasn't trained in threat hunting yet, or and so I think that get over the shiny object concept. You have now a body of knowledge that expresses what most attackers know and what most attackers use. When you adequately defend yourself against that, then up-level your organization.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, when I was at RSA this year in my role as a cybersecurity reporter, when I walked into the exhibit area at Moscone Center, it was just sensory overload. There were just hundreds of exhibitors, bright lights, colors, activity. How, in your assessment, Adam or either one of you, how differentiated is, let's say vendor number 1 versus vendor number 4,000? I mean, is there a big difference, across the landscape of solutions, technology solutions that are being offered?
So we're at least trying to help vendors express the answer to that with some of the work we're doing around attack evaluations. And so we've done work that we're just getting into the 3rd round of now, where we've done a fairly interesting type of evaluations, a little bit different, where we have a vendor come in, get their product set up in a range where they've got access to it, and they function as the blue team. And then we come in as a red team with a script. We're doing adversary emulation. So where the first round was APT3, second round was APT29, and then evaluating how the vendor did in reference to specific attack techniques and the activities that the red team was taking. And so we rely upon the vendors to tell us what they've seen, show us proof of it, and then we publish all of it. And so we don't put ourselves in a place where we're weighing, who won or who performed better in the particular evaluation. We are trying to put tools out there so that people can actually make those judgments for themselves and be able to take a look at what matters to them. I'm not going to wade into the who's better differentiation, but we're trying to help people make those decisions.
Well, and there's a big, I've been on the buy side for a long time. First and foremost, you're exactly right, Gary. It's a dizzying array of vendors that are out there. They're moving targets, as in, I'll characterize the life cycle of a good security product is Series C to acquisition, and then when they get a product gets acquired by a big company and gets integrated, it gets diluted in all of the other functional capabilities of that product, and so you got to be very mindful of that. You have a strategy of how you want to buy. Do I want to run a bunch of unique products, or do I want one simpler aggregate platform of capabilities? And all of that is always changing. And then you got your business activities on the other side of now we're going to the cloud, and all that crap you bought actually doesn't work there. So you got these architectural ramifications. So it's an exceptionally challenging job just in managing the ecosystem of cybersecurity. And the foundational punchline, the foundational thing is that we often buy these things without functional requirements. What should this thing defend me against? That is a core use case for Attack IQ. You have an attack simulation platform that uses attack. These are the defined techniques and tactics we want to defend ourselves against. Will product A or product B do that for me in my environment? Now you're also armed with the good work at Mitre and evaluations as an additional set of data to enter that conversation with, and how awesome that is to change that acquisition conversation, which used to be, what are my non-functional requirements? How cheap is it? What kind of cool swag do I get? That kind of silly sales stuff versus making it real.
I had heard, and maybe either one of you can validate if this is the case, that in a typical enterprise organization, they might have as many as, I think the number was 47 or more solutions, in their cybersecurity stack. Is that valid? And if so, how do you manage all that?
Yeah, I've heard up to 75, depending on the size of the organization.
Wow.
Some of the big financial institutions that are hyper federated, they have competing products that do the same thing in terms of the functional space. And, they fight over mine's better than yours, mainly because I don't want to change. So that's just at the platform level. If you get into the GRC side of the house, you start counting what they call functional controls that would be mapped to a control framework. There's over 900.
Wow.
And over half of those are not explicitly platform related. They're detection logic that are, sophisticated in correlation rules and different aggregate data sets and things like that. And so think about what the implications are as a security executive responsible for defending the firm, where you got to run 75 operations things. That's 75 sets of platters that run, an operations team of people that sit on top of that, a network ecosystem that collects all that information, a workflow that's driven out of it. And if any of it fails at any time, and it's the time that the actors in your house, you're fired.
Yeah, speaking of fired, I also have learned recently that the average tenure of a CISO is not that long, maybe about 18 months, something like that. Is that accurate?
Well, I would say I've heard it called the Chief Information Scapegoat Officer. That's correct. Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of an unfair metric. I mean, I'll also say, I've been a CISO or CISO-like for a lot of my career, and I've lived through incidents. And the reality is, like, how you manage, how you deal with things, and fit for role. It's a very difficult job because of both, the professional pedigrees and requirements it takes. You got to be a technologist, you got to be an evangelist, you got to be a deal maker, you got to be a champion for the company, you got to be a team leader. And, just the reality is the environments are so complicated, and the sophistication required to do it is just a rare breed. And you get in there and you rub the wrong elbows the wrong way and you don't make it, or you get hammered with the incident. And so it requires a special set of skills. And that's why one of the areas where I'm so bullish about where Att&ck is. I've got a customer that was brand new to their institution. Don't need to get into details. And they're like, I'm not ready to do any of this automated testing stuff. And I got to rebuild everything. And I'm like, why do you have to rebuild everything? Why do you think that? Have you done any set of testing to benchmark where you're at? Why don't you pick off the threat actor behavior you're worried most about, do some assessments, and then say, these are all my failure points for this specific threat actor. I'm going to fix A, B, and C. Hey, board of directors, here's my plan. And here's how I got there. And what a wonderfully way to disambiguate this role and the challenges of it when you're working against fixing it. And when something does go bad, you show them, of course it's going to go bad. We haven't invested in that particular behavior to be able to defend ourselves yet.
Well, I mean, let me just jump in one point there that is something I've always really wondered about. So if you think of the capital allocation within the cybersecurity ecosystem, let's just kind of look at the 80-20 rule, that maybe 80% of the resources are in technology solutions, maybe 20% on, let's call it the human element, which was the theme of the RSA conference. And from what I understand, and please, clarify this for me, that the overwhelming majority of hacks are caused by simple human error. Is that reconcilable?
It is to me. Like, I use and I'm sorry, Adam, if I keep stepping on you. The Verizon DVR I referenced earlier, like, human error is in many layers, right? It's human error to not have good operating procedures for your security controls. Now, I'm not talking about the incident response process. I'm talking about, wait a minute, SANS tells us the number one problem in every enterprise is asset management. I don't even know what I have. Well, if one of your key security controls is agent-based, and you don't know how many assets you have, how do you know you have agents on every one of them? That's a human error. You're not building good operational practices around how you manage your security controls. Or you make a change to the firewall without knowing what the actual implications are from a threat behavior standpoint. And then that aggregates all the way up to the SOC operator didn't have a chance, or the SOC operator didn't see the thing. And so yeah, these all come down to, I think the way we think about our security program, and just inherently, because we bought something and attempted to half-ass put it in place, that it's going to work all the time. It's just foolhardy today. And some of that's on the vendor, but most of it's on the organization.
Indeed. And Adam, you had mentioned earlier in the show that Mitre has gone through Sec DevOps, continual improvement, feedback, adapt, improve. What do you think the future of the Mitre attack matrix is? What's it going to look like in 5 years, or even next year?
So the enterprise matrix itself is, hopefully stabilizing a bit. So we've had some work over the last few years where we've started ingesting other pieces of other attacks into it. We have a parallel framework called Pre-Attack that has been out there for a number of years. We haven't seen it leveraged as much in industry, anywhere near as much as what most people call attack, which is enterprise attack. And so Pre-Attack describes actions that happen before an adversary breaks into an environment. 2 years ago, we took part of pre-attack and brought it into attack. So we deprecated something called launch and compromise and added initial access to attack. And we're in the middle of doing something similar right now to the rest of pre-attack, where we're getting ready to deprecate all of the rest of pre-attack and add 2 tactics onto attack, reconnaissance and resource development. So attack's going to look a little bit wider. At the same time, we're evaluating how much it makes sense to integrate other portions of attack into a single framework and a single matrix.
Well, I've never had a scoop, but I'd love one right now. When is this going to be ready?
It's going to be on our next release. We don't have the release date set yet, but it's coming soon. And so this is actually something that we've been talking about out in the public since October of last year. It was something that we designed to come after sub-techniques, though. And so it was put on hold until really after we got a release out this summer. But so, works back on it. We're getting it out. And so it's something that's coming pretty soon. We're trying to make sure that the community is aware that it's coming.
Well, we'd be glad to help amplify your message. And as we're wrapping up here, Adam, is there anything else that you'd like to add, that will help amplify your mission?
No, we've been simply blown away by the amount of use, the amount of attention that attack's had over the last 5 years. It was something that started out as an Excel spreadsheet and sort of looked like it when we first got it out the door. It wasn't even really noticed much by industry first couple of years it was out. A couple of companies started to adopt it, but it's only been really like the last 3 years where we've seen it go wild. And so, we've been trying to do a lot of work last year, trying to help people understand the threat intelligence origins of attack, that it is linked to real behavior. But mostly we're just really thankful to the community that is helping us understand what it is we're missing, what we could be doing better, and just keeping us informed and keeping us honest.
And Chris, is there anything that you'd like to add to amplify your mission?
Yeah, I would. I'll address it in terms of where I see it going from a market standpoint. Like I see attack as kind of the bigger, better what CVE and CVSS did for the vulnerability management markets, right? Like I can already tell you today, our customer community has already identified what I call 26 different use cases of the application of attack. So whatever kind of practitioner you are, people are using attack in this concept of automated testing as a way to validate security. You move across the spectrum of risk and automating the audit process and allowing that to inform your risk management processes and improving and desubjectifying those activities, allowing operations to evolve from what I call pipeline validation, or the SOC actually can get its detection stuff to work, to move to threat hunters, to move to meaningful training injects, and enable, as part of your disaster recovery continuity of exercises, making those more powerful. From your engineering and architecture, using this as a way to define functional requirements and make sure you're buying the right thing now and through time. Threat modeling and tying that into your project SDLC whenever you're buying new technologies and making sure they have security and automating all of that, all the way to corner case use cases. We have customers that are vendors that are using this concept of attack and aligning with it, and then automation platforms like Attack IQ to improve the efficacy of their products, to get themselves training ready to enter MITRE evaluations. So like, it's really cool to see even merger and acquisition. Like you got organizations like, I'm going to go buy a company. Well, how are we going to figure out if their security posture is good? Well, let's go beat them up and see how they respond. Use this automation platform to do that. Attack gives us all these great TTPs to use. And so that's mind-blowing to me to see in 3 years how this little hobby shop framework that started on an Excel spreadsheet is now turned into one of the most meaningful things an organization can adopt to evolve its security program. And boy, the timing couldn't be better given what's going on in our market dynamics. Like everyone's anticipating business market reductions because of COVID impacts and things like that, the pivot to work from home. Security executives need to be thinking about ways to innovate right now, and they need to figure out how they're going to be able to deal with potentially doing more with less. And this is a key way you can do that.
Indeed. So more as we're wrapping up, my final kind of question. First of all, I thank both of you so much for being real life unsung cyber heroes. One of the privileges of doing this show is I get to listen and learn to these incredible people who are selfless. They're all about service, and I hope what we're doing here today, will help. And on a personal note, when I was the CEO of a marketing company that was hacked and ended up losing everything, and the time afterwards, I needed some kind of North Star, coping mechanism because of the negative impacts of this stuff. And so I happened to hear a quote from Albert Einstein when a reporter asked him, he said, Mr. Einstein, on one hand you have science and physics and mathematics, and on the other hand you have the possible existence of a higher authority. How do you kind of reconcile that? And Einstein famously said, coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous. So Adam, as a last word, can you share with our audience something kind of coincidental in your life that's happened that kind of defies logic?
Ooh, that's a good one, Gary. Adam first on that.
Well, we could go to Chris while you gather your thoughts if you want. Chris, tell our audience an Einstein moment.
We all operate today under, we are human. We are pack animals. We are assumed trusting. And so for your entire career, you have probably bought and assumed and deployed and trusted from a security perspective. And you've missed that validation thing. It's an integral component of systems engineering when you look at the engineering V, and we haven't done it. You just haven't done your annual pen test, your annual compliance, and it was mind blowing for me to think about what this thing could be. And so the epiphany for me, the Einstein moment, is man, I have been trusting but not verifying. And that's bad. It's bad for your career.
Wow. Well, one of the things that was amazing to me is we work in an industry called zero trust. Where do you go from there? Adam, did you want to have a last word? You know what? Let's pivot. Do you have a favorite superhero in your life?
Probably Wolverine.
Why?
I'm a big fan of the claws. The coming back, always being resilient, but it really comes down to the claws.
Sweet. And how about you, Chris?
I would say the same, man. You got to be tough as nails. You all of us carry a little bit of baggage. Mission oriented, Wolverine was always super driven, and those kind of characteristics. I don't know if it was the Marine Corps, if it was me, DNA, but I would always, a bit of a bad attitude sometimes. That all sounds like me.
on that upbeat note,
unstoppable.
On that upbeat note, thanks again to Adam and Chris for this incredible show. For more information, we'll include our guest contact information and other information in the show notes. In the meantime, thank you so much for what all of you do, and have a great day.